Hi there, welcome to Hey Sound Guy, a podcast where I'll be peeking behind the curtains of the wonderful world of music. Each week I'll be speaking to sound engineers, music industry professionals, musicians, and anyone I think are interesting, really. We'll get to know them a little bit better, share some fun stories from the road, and see what they've been up to. Now, my next guest is a good friend. I've known him about 12 years as we worked out. He is an incredible pianist, a musician. He's a lovely guy. He's the artistic director of Ronnie Scott's Jazz Club since quite a while ago. I think 2006. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome the great James Pearson."
Thank you.
Thank you for doing this. I appreciate it.
It's a great pleasure.
Oh, I've been thinking about getting you on ever since I started this thing. And I'm glad that we finally getting to do it.
It's I've been looking forward to it, and as you say, you've been asking me for quite a while, and it's built momentum and all that, and it's great. Podcasts are the way forward.
It is. I especially, with our busy lives, when would you ever get to sit down one-on-one with anybody nowadays, really, and just have a real chat?
That's very true. In fact, a lot of people have been saying that they actually talk to people more because they're actually assigning the time to do it. My mother says she's never spoken to her sister so much as she has during the lockdown, which is quite funny.
Well, it's good. It's keeping us all connected, which is a great thing. I think we need more connectedness in this time,
definitely,
rather than division. Yeah. How I like to start these things is if you could introduce yourself and tell us what it is that you do, and then we'll get into how you got to do what it is that you do.
Okay. Well, my name's James Pearson, and I am the pianist, house pianist, and artistic director at Ronnie Scott's currently. Primarily, I'm a pianist. I play all sorts of music, jazz, classical, bit of pop, and I compose music as well. But my main role as a musician at the moment is at Ronnie Scott's.
Yes, and that's where we know each other from since the past. Right. I started there May 2008, so it's just coming up to 12 years now.
Yeah, and I was there literally since just before the refurb, which was in 2006. So, 2000. So yeah, I've known you the whole time that you've been at Ronnie Scott's.
The whole time, and much fun was had.
Yes, maybe more fun in the early days.
Oh yeah, no, I think we've all definitely calmed down quite a lot. Yeah, those days at the dog. Also, the timings were a little bit different, so we used to have a little bit more time at the dog than we do now. But maybe these timings work out better. Get to present more music.
Yeah, but do you remember when we were first doing it? There was the house band were playing so much more. They were playing like 3 sets a night. Yeah, so
you did a support, and then afterwards you played as well 2 sets.
Yeah, so it was a hell of a lot of playing. So and then the gaps were quite good. So there was a lot of pub time as well.
A lot of pub time, yeah. Especially on Fridays and Saturdays were always support, main, and then support again. So you had a break from 7:45.
Yeah, we had about 4
11.
hours break.
Yeah,
5 hours break. It was disgraceful, really.
Yeah.
Anyway,
someone can get up to no good in that time. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, we did try to.
Very many times, I think we succeeded. Got up to all sorts of no good. But yeah, those are different days. It's funny how when you're in the present, it feels like it's the same, but when you look back, even like I said, 5 or 10 years, you're like, wow, times were actually a lot different. I suppose maybe we were younger as well, but it just feels like as you go through the decades. I mean, for me, I think the 90s were like a super time, but especially sort of musically speaking. I mean, for me as a rock and roller, more It feels like it was quite vibrant, and there was a lot happening. You had the grunge movement, and then all the new metal and all the new things that came out, and it felt like there was a lot of movement and a lot of innovative things, and then rap just kind of took over.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to say,
now everybody just want to rap,
and it stayed that way.
Unfortunately, or fortunately, I mean, it's not my cup of tea, but other people like it, so that's their business. As long as we can keep jazzing, then I think we'll be all right. I mean, it's one of the genres that's kind of stuck the test of time, from the 20s, and it's just gained momentum and popularity. And you see a lot of, especially since the Late Show started with Moenzo. It's gained a lot of popularity among students, younger people. I think it's
definitely
a good thing.
It's a great platform for them to meet, greet, and have a good old play. And in fact, the musicians I met when I was that age at jam sessions are the ones I still meet and play with, like Alex Garnett, who now runs some of the late shows, and all that. So it's a funny thing. And as you say, jazz has always been around for 100 odd years now, but it's sort of moved with the times. It's sometimes very hard to work out what jazz is now, but as long as but because it seems to cover everything, and if they're not sure about a type of music, then they'll call it jazz sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, you get, especially like with guys like Soweto Kinch and stuff like that, you get a lot of crossover, where it's sort of like a hip hop jazz / rap jazz / I mean, you can get from the funkiest funk to the most traditional jazz. It's quite a broad spectrum of music.
Well, I think exactly, and even when 100 years ago, or New Orleans and all that, it was actually not only about music; it was about culture, and it was a fusion of the cultures. And New Orleans had so many different cultures living there. You had the French, you had the Spanish, you had the Americans, you had the Native Americans, etc., etc. And there was all these different influences of lifestyle as well, and that's similar, as you say, to what Soweto's been doing. Drawing from all sorts of things, so it's quite vibrant, really.
Yeah, it's very exciting, and you see new players like last night. That Thomas Burra, he's incredible. He's really good.
And a really nice guy to boot. But
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you get guys like Ruben James, young players. They're all just fantastic. On the piano, and especially since that's your forte. But you're also a multi-instrumentalist. You're one of those guys. You just look at it and you can play it.
I can play a few. I can't play the saxophone or the trumpets. I can't play blowing instruments, but string instruments, guitars and banjos and bass and things like that, and I can just about get by. And I used to play the bass. Actually, I played at Ronnie Scott's a trio set on bass with Tom Corley once. I don't know whether you remember that.
I don't, but I do remember. You remember you jumping on Sam's bass a few times.
It was my own fault because I'd actually forgot to book a bass player, and then Tom Corley happened to be in the audience, so I ended up saying, "Tom, can you do the piano chair, and I'll play the bass?" And he looked really confused because he didn't know that I could just about, and as long as he didn't play too fast, then it was okay.
Brilliant. Yeah, he's another fantastic pianist. He's his chat's always very amusing. The in between talks.
Exactly.
His dry humor just cracks me up. It's brilliant. So
I think a lot of go on.
No, please tell me.
No, I was going to say a lot of jazz musicians are so sort of thought out people musically, and they spend a lot of time thinking, spent a lot of their time on their own, working things out and practicing, that sometimes their sense of humour takes a while to be understood, but once it's understood and you're on their wavelength, then it's quite funny, isn't it? And Tom's a classic example of that.
Yeah. And I think Gareth Williams is another one of those. He's just got that tongue-in-cheek sort of, just a little underhanded jokes here and there. It's brilliant. It's kind
Definitely.
of as you described the jazz humor, or the jazz musician's humor. It was the same sort of journey for me into first understanding and then starting to like jazz, because for me growing up I always, for some reason, the only thing I had in my head as jazz was like contemporary jazz and free jazz and stuff like that, and I was like, this is just crazy. I can't follow along with this. And I mean, to be honest with you, I'm still having a hard time getting through those things and kind of finding my place. But you know, my journey into jazz is it's been a good one, and you know, I think I'm at the point where, you know, I can kind of, you know, understand the sort of musical jokes you guys make between each other, and when you know, play licks at each other and things like that, and it's almost like it's a higher level of musical understanding, because everybody, all the musicians in the jazz world, you're never just going to find a tourist. You know, you're not just some guy, oh, I play a few chords. No, if you're into the genre, you know, you're going to have to know your stuff. You're going to have to know your instrument. You know, and there shouldn't be any umming and ahhing, you know, which scale we're doing and which movements are we following now. You know, it's a
exactly.
It's not a paddling pool for toddlers. It's the real deal. You know, you're
exactly.
trying out for the seals here. You know. Yeah, it's great. Tell me a little bit about how your journey started as a musician.
So I started playing the piano when I was about 4. And I think that's one of the things, is that we had a piano at home, and it was just a piece of wood that I used to like climb onto, and it made a lot of noise. I didn't really sort of appreciate the fine art of piano playing, but my parents recognised that I obviously quite liked making noise on this thing. So I was having lessons from 6, and this was all classical sort of type of music. But I used to already make up my own things that I liked, which was sort of nonsensical music. So I was quite young, and then just carried on training, did the sort of the grades that you do, and it was when I was about 11, 12 that I got into jazz and boogie woogie. And in fact, it was Elvis Presley, the death of Elvis Presley in 1977. He died in August, and my father went into a decline because he was a big Elvis fan, and it introduced me to rock and roll, and then into Jerry Lee Lewis and all these sort of Fats Domino and all these sort of boogie woogie type New Orleans pianists that did the whole rock and roll thing. And then after that, I got more interested in sort of boogie woogie, and then the jazz came a bit later when I was about 12 or 13, and someone gave me a record of Fats Waller playing ragtime, and I loved it. I didn't really understand that it was very sophisticated and complicated. It appealed to me, and also it had a lot of sort of humour in it. You know, he used to make jokes whilst he was playing, so it was that sort of thing, a very light approach to it. And then I just play along with the records, sometimes work out my own thing, and I just carried on doing music. Basically, started to play the violin, the viola, the double bass in the orchestra. I was pretty crap at the violin, so I stopped that. Then I got stopped the viola. Then I got thrown out of the orchestra for bad behaviour. Stayed on the bass, and then eventually ended to the Guildhall School of Music. Did a music degree and focusing on piano. Then I did an advanced degree, again focusing on piano, all classical piano. I never studied jazz. Jazz was always a thing I did alongside. And then in my last year at music college, I got a job playing in a sort of jazz club stroke restaurant called the Jazz Bistro in Farringdon Road, and I used to run these jam sessions, and that's where I met people like Alex Garnett, and this was in about 1992, so quite a while back. It was places where Giles Peterson first started. He just started to do DJing in the cellar of this place, and there was a bit of an eminent scene in the early 90s in London. There was a lot of club scenes that were beginning to happen, and we had this jazz club, then there was a dance club downstairs which had a few illegal raves and things like that. The place isn't there now, and the guy's gone to Italy, so but it was a great fun. And then I just worked in bands, mostly jazz bands, like the BBC Big Band or the Sid Lawrence Orchestra, Pasadena Roof Orchestra, my own trio, and eventually met Leo Green, who I knew since I was a child. And he then installed me as the house piano player at Ronnie Scott's, which is where I met you. Mm-hmm. Leo left, I took over from him. Right. Basically. That's just a whole lot of stuff, but you got the idea.
Fantastic. So did you say the Pasadena Youth Orchestra? Did you live in the States?
No, Pasadena Roof Orchestra is it's based on a sort of it is basically a mock 1920s band. It's a British band. They actually played at Ronnie's the other day at a stream. It's all that 1920s stuff.
Oh right, fantastic.
And it was quite fun and jolly. Sort of, the singer would sing through a megaphone like they used to do in the 1920s. And
okay.
So yeah, I used to play with them, and they toured around. Yeah, that was it really.
Nice. That's great. And you did that sort of before you started at Ronnie's.
Yeah, I was before I started Ronnie's. I was playing in mostly the Sid Lawrence Orchestra, which is a big band, and just my own trio. I'm basically freelance musician playing in saying yes to every gig I could possibly get, basically.
As you do, man. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's kind of every walk, especially if you're a freelance individual professional, then you're gonna grab everything with both hands if you've got any kind of sense.
Yes, definitely.
Until people start knowing who you are, and then once you get there, then usually it's a little bit better and easier.
I agree, though there is a fine line, because if you end up saying yes to everything, you end up sometimes spreading yourself so thin that people never actually know what you do. In my case, certainly because I play all sorts of music, jazz, classical, sometimes it can be a bit confusing, because there's, even though obviously I'm known as a jazz pianist, but then there's a whole load of classical people that don't even know I play jazz, so it's quite funny. But in a sense that hasn't helped, because you become sort of quite good at everything rather than really good or really known as one thing, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. I had this exact conversation with Rick Simpson the other day, when he said as well, he likes to have a broad spectrum of within jazz, but he's not gonna focus on just 1930s jazz or more modern funk stuff. He likes to have a sort of a full palette, and the problem with that is that people, they know you and they'll call you, but you probably won't be the first call, because you're not the 1930s jazz guy, or you're not the ragtime guy, you're not but you can get it all. I mean, I don't know, for me personally, I think it's I'm much more like that, in that I don't, I've got no, illusions that, that I'm going to be the best sound engineer out there, I mean, that boat sailed, it's but I'm, I like what I do very much, I think I'm good enough, because I'm still in the business after a while. I haven't been kicked out, so but then I do have other things as well, which I'm interested in, which I'm passionate about. Like we spoke before about, the archery. I like to play music. As you can see, there's a bunch of guitars behind me. The carpentry stuff that I do, the cooking stuff, making food and things like that. I like to describe myself as a Swiss Army knife rather than a hunting knife. I've
That's
got
fantastic.
A blade.
Lovely. Yeah.
I've got a blade, and it cuts and it does what it needs to do, but it's not something you're going to go take hunting. But then I've also got a little saw, and I've got a scissors and a tweezer and everything else. So
good.
I can get you out of
I'm
the
glad
pinch.
you still got the tweezers.
Those are usually the ones that get lost first. That and
the toothpick.
The toothpick. Yeah. Oh man, I've had so many of those, and they just that was always the first thing to go lost. I had when I was younger, I was a knife obsessed. I had a huge collection of knives, from tiny little fold open pocket knives. Just 1 second, please. Savannah, Papa is besser. Alsjeblieft. To hunting knives, to diving knives, my hands will show the receipt of playing with knives. All my youth, so it's but I prefer to, sort of a jack of all trades. I like to put myself in that category.
Yeah, exactly. It's good.
Well, I mean, the classical stuff that you play is I love it, honestly. When I walk into Ronnie's and you're sitting there practicing and you're doing some Rachmaninoff and stuff like that, I'm just chills, goosebumps. I tell you what, it's incredible. I love to hear you play that.
For me, it's very important to still do that, because it's a different side of music, because it's a different discipline, and it's all about getting the sound right, not only the notes right, but actually about getting a consistently quality of sound.
Yeah.
Because when you're doing improvised music, sometimes because you're essentially thinking about the tune you're playing or the notes, sometimes the sound quality can go, especially if you're playing the piano. It's a very sort of almost high level stuff. But whereas you're playing Bach, it's all about making sure that the sound quality, the notes are connected really legato.
And the cadence
and all that. And the piano has got so much sort of tonal complexities that it's nice to sort of explore it, which you can do a bit more within classical music.
Yeah, it's very regimented as well. It's like, these are the notes, this is how it was written, this is what you're going to play. And the composer had every intent behind every dot that he drew. So there's no mistaking, there's no interpretation, this is how it is, this is how it all fits together. Whether it be solo piano piece or as part of an orchestra, it's everything's got its place. Whereas with jazz and any kind of improvisational music, it's open for interpretation. You can set your own beat. Sometimes you're going to go a bit faster, sometimes a bit slower, sometimes you're going to insert some bars here and there. You can add a double chorus. You can do whatever you want. It's just whatever you feel like and wherever the mood is going. So yeah, I think it's good to to keep up with those chops, and I'm sure it's fun for you as well. No?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. As you say, it's a different discipline, but it's good. Yeah. It certainly helps, because then when you get to play jazz, your ears tend to be slightly humped, because you've played some sort of, especially if you're playing Debussy or Scriabin or some of them sort of slightly Ravel, the harmonies that these guys used were so sort of advanced, and then you can simply apply them to a jazz solo and it sounds really sort of, where'd you get those chords from? I mean, they've been around for hundreds of years, all these amazing harmonies, but often they weren't used in jazz, but now people are playing them all the time. But it's it's different.
Yeah, it took a little while for people to catch up with that sort of thing, like, oh, hold on, there's a whole library of licks there.
It's funny, because the great jazz pianists, and I'm talking about the ones that started it all off 100 years ago, the way the music was taught, you didn't learn jazz in the way that they do now. You don't go to college in those days. Every pianist, like Oscar Peterson, Fats Waller, they either learnt through the church or they learnt classical piano, because that's the only way. The only way of teaching an instrument was via Mozart and Bach and all those great masters of composition and Borin studies and things like that. But they all had such a solid technique and musical grounding by playing this music, even though they ended up playing in dance bands and jazz, etc., etc. But I think that sometimes gets forgotten, and when people go and just study jazz, it's sometimes can be a bit limiting, because people don't give the value of importance on the other stuff. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I think also with contemporary musical education is such a young thing as well. I mean, in the 60s and 70s, I don't think there were any kind of contemporary music degrees that you could do. It was, you do the classical and that's it. But nowadays, people, you can specialize from the get-go. You can go do a funk guitar course, if you will, or you can go, and then you're going to end up playing like Prince, but are you going to be able to do anything else? I feel that it might be limiting to some degree, not to get the strong foundation, the classical foundation. I mean, the musical language was written in a way and based on rules, which whether or not you're going to follow the rules or bend them or break them or write new rules, but you got to know where the basis is, and if you don't have that, if you've got the 10 Commandments and you only get taught 1, 2, and 3, you don't know. You'll be great at not killing and on that. But
Lovely.
it's I think that's very important, and as a just basically to round yourself off as a musician, and in everything really as a person, to not bind yourself to one specific thing. It's one of the points I keep hammering on is to, especially if you do love your job and you enjoy what you do. People like us in the entertainment industry, we are normally working 10 to 16 hours a day, 5-6 days a week, and we do it because we love it, because there's a passion there, but also we need to remember that you got to switch off sometime and do something else, just to give give your brain some pause, and to draw some inspiration as well, from the other things that you do, and then bring it into your main practice. I think that's an important thing that people they tend to overlook it. Well, hopefully now after this period of madness, people might have explored their other passions. Like Tim Thornton, who's making pizzas.
Definitely.
Really, really delicious pizzas. And was it Alex Maynard? He's building, also doing carpentry stuff in his garden, and he's building planters and building a little windy house. And everybody's getting up to all sorts of different things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I
it's
think
been very good for that reason.
Absolutely, yeah. Just to kind of see what else is out there for us to to enjoy, and not get stuck in this rat race of just going and going and going.
That's so true.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Before all this happened, I was just myself going 120 miles an hour. Just got to take every job, got to do it. I got to get, got to make money, and then it feels like if you don't do X amount of work and you don't earn X amount of money, then you're going to be in trouble and you're going to have a hard time. But I mean, during this last year, I think we've gotten by with a third of what we used to, and we're all still here. We're all still eating every day, and bills are paid and stuff like that. So it's we don't really need as much as maybe we thought we did. But
that's very true.
Yeah,
it's very true.
What have you been getting up to during lockdown? Because we haven't really seen each other at all.
In the beginning of the lockdown, I used it as an excuse to have quite a lot of parties, even though I wasn't supposed to. But I had quite a lot of social gatherings. I've got a big garden here,
nice.
But I'm really into cooking, as you know. So I spend a lot of time perfecting certain cooking techniques and things like that. And in the summer, because we had amazing weather at the beginning of the first lockdown.
Yeah, that was incredible.
So I was able to have lots of barbecues and did lots of smoking of meat, like offset smoker. So I got really into that because, as you say, before it started, I was literally all over the place. So I never put a time to do these things, like cooking properly, even though I can cook, but to actually get the marinades right, and because I would never give it the time to do it. And when you suddenly had the forced time, it was really cool. And then musically, I played a lot of Beethoven sonatas because it was his 200th anniversary. So I thought, I've got all this time. I think what happened with the first lockdown is we all thought it was going to finish.
Yeah,
we didn't know how long it was going to go, but we didn't think it was going to go on for a year.
3 weeks to flatten the curve, right?
So it sort of set a little precedent, like it was having a free holiday for a while.
Yeah,
and so there was a sort of element of, this is unreal, so let's just embrace it. And then that certainly continued because the weather was so good in this country anyway.
Yeah.
This last one I think has been completely pointless, but anyway, we won't go into that. But it's just,
I'm in total agreement with you there.
It's just, I know. I just think I felt very sort of just disillusioned by this last one because it's I'm now looking at the damage it has caused for all the musicians I know, because there's so much work has been cancelled, and apart from obviously Ronnie Scott's itself, but all the theatre gigs that we were doing, none of that's going to happen till the end of the year, and I expect it'll just be not happen. So it's a sort of real. Yeah, a lot of people say to me, "Oh, yeah, what's going to happen when you go back to work?" And it's not going to be like that for a lot of musicians, because a lot of venues have closed. And that sort of bleakness of it actually has really hit me in the last few weeks, whereas before I sort of wasn't really thinking about it, but I suppose I am now. Yeah. But anyway, apart from that, your question was, I've just been enjoying. I mean, I've been doing a bit of building shelves as well, and I've got a lovely garden here, so I've just been planting things. I've just been doing herb gardens, and I live on my own, so I've got I can just mess about basically.
Nice, that's fantastic.
I've got an old wind-up gramophone over there, which you can't see, but so I've been playing lots of old records and things like that.
Awesome. With a cup of tea, just listening to some old records. Yeah, man. Exactly. Beethoven. His music is just so inspiring. I mean, I think my favorite piece of music ever is the Moonlight Sonata. And did you ever see My Mortal Beloved?
I've never seen it with Gary Oldman. I've always wanted to see it.
I would recommend it. I might have
to. It's meant to be very good. I mean, the interesting thing that fascinates me about Beethoven, apart from the fact he wasn't a healthy man, he had a lot of illness. He had bad diarrhea for the past 5 years of his life. He was deaf for the last few years. He wasn't physically in a comfortable position, and he wrote all this sublime music. But the deaf thing is quite interesting, because as a result of it, there was a series of notebooks, so that when people spoke to Beethoven, because he couldn't hear them and he couldn't lip read, they wrote down in these books. So everything that was said to Beethoven of importance in the last 5 years of his life was written down in these notebooks.
Wow.
So you have a real picture of, and then obviously he wouldn't write his answers down because he would speak them, but you had a real sort of interesting picture of what his life was like. Have you paid the gas bill? This is how much you're getting for this. And that was all written down.
Yes, of course, woman, I paid the bloody... you can just
exactly.
see him go off.
But it's all these menial, functional things that you never know about a person. That with Beethoven, you've got this sort of one-sided view of his life in incredible detail.
Wow.
Whereas you don't with a lot of composers.
Yeah, unfortunately not. Record keeping wasn't a big thing.
And he was an amazing improviser as well. Apparently, when a Beethoven concert, because improvisation had such a role in music in the whole of Mozart's time up until Wagner really, and Mahler, the development of the seriousness of it all, that's when improvisation suddenly sort of changed a bit. But Beethoven was a master improviser, and often his concerts, he would have an orchestra there. They would play one movement of a symphony, then he'd play a song, and then maybe a movement of a violin sonata, then they'd do the next movement of the symphony, then there'd be a movement of a piano sonata. So everything was sort of spread out. Then he'd do an improvisation on themes of the day. The whole thing would go on about 7 hours. They'd have a lunch in between, It was like a day with Beethoven. That's how the concerts were in upper society.
Can you imagine what that would have been like? My Lord. Just pure pleasure.
Yeah. It would have been very interesting. Someone tried to reconstruct it. But I think the other thing is that people's concentration spans in those days, certainly 200 years ago, were a lot higher. Nowadays, if you play a piece of music or anything to a 4-year-old, they can't concentrate for more than 2 minutes. But because we've got everything at our feet, at our disposal. Whereas, and music. And if you think about it, even prog rock is suffering because people don't allow time to listen to music or to compose something that's a long piece of music. Whereas a symphony, could be 40 minutes of music. Bruckner symphony is even longer. Mahler symphony is even longer. And very few people allow the time to enjoy that and can physically concentrate for that amount of time nowadays. We're not used to it.
I mean, I was thinking about that the other day as well. Just even in terms of, say, communicating with somebody over a long distance. You'd have to write a letter, maybe the postman comes next week to pick it up, and then they got to horseback it to wherever, and then it's getting on the cart, and then it goes there. I mean, those people will get you later, maybe in a month, and then they got to compose it, and then it comes back. So imagine a text message taking 2 months to get a reply.
Everything was elongated, wasn't it? It was like, you had time to digest things as well. Because as you know, when you physically write a letter, you think about it in a completely different way than just a sort of flippant text, Sort of, and nowadays, a lot of people don't even, it physically hurts to write because people don't have to do it anymore.
It's definitely, people, you see them writing something, and you're like, did you learn to write in school, or were you in some kind of whorehouse or something? What happened here? Because this doesn't look like it looks like you've got some Japanese kanji mixed up with the original lettering, and it's weird. But it's writing, I find, is a very stimulating, like actually putting pen to paper or a pencil, is a very meditative experience,
Definitely.
Especially when you're writing pen, you're going to try and not make mistakes. So you think about the word before you write the word. Maybe, you can think a few words ahead, but you're going to concentrate on what you're doing, writing that word out, because you don't want to have a bunch of scratches on the page and imagine you're halfway down and then you make a mistake. You got to start all over again and apply the perfume again. And it's even with traveling and things, imagine how long it would have taken. You would have sailed for 3 months on a boat to get from here to America, and now you jump on a plane. 11 hours later, it's not even 11 hours.
Well, that's right. A tour, a sort of a tour of Europe, would take 2 or 3 years.
Yeah,
because the travel time in between the cities, it would take 2 or 3 weeks to get from city to city.
Exactly.
Those tours that Mozart did when he was a little boy, his father organised, they took 2 or 3 years. So he first came to England when he was like 6, and then when he next came, he would have been 12 or something like that. Because that same tour when he was 6, by the end of that tour finished, he was 11. It had gone on that long.
That's quite a tour. You don't do that anymore, do you? Yeah, because he lived in the theatre that's in front of Ronnie's for 2 years.
Well, he lived on a site there, not in the theatre. That wasn't there, but before that he came. That was when he was, I think he was 16. I can't remember when that. But if you go to another street in London called Cecil Court, there's a plaque there where Mozart stayed when he was very little, when he came and played for George III or whatever it was. Great.
Yeah, that's another great movie. About Mozart, Amadeus. Have you seen that one?
Very good. Very.
Brilliant.
I've seen it many times. It's
good.
A really inspirational film, and it's funny. It's quirky.
Yeah.
The music. It's got a real nice balance between, seriousness and silliness, and it shows what there's a couple of little bits I really like in that film. The one bit I like is when he's composing something, or he's not, and he's playing with a billiard ball, because apparently Mozart was absolutely brilliant at billiards or snooker.
Yeah, it's towards the end of the movie when he had a commission that he had to finish in the movie, and he was just flicking the ball around the table whilst he's composing, and he's like, and then he hears it. Oh, it's brilliant, so good.
Exactly.
I mean, that, like you said, inspirational. It's just how do you? I mean, because you compose music, you write. Do you write for orchestras? Do you? Is it how would that process work? Would you start with a single line, maybe like a piano line, or write one?
It depends,
bit
really. I have written
adding?
for orchestras. A lot of the time, I usually start with the piano and then orchestrate it from that part. But sometimes I'm purposely trying not to have that, because I'm so good at the piano. I have such a knowledge of the way the instrument works. I can play lots of things on the piano that might not necessarily translate into an orchestra. I think the hardest thing about pianists writing for orchestra, you've got to know how the instruments work. Certain things that you learn. The first time I wrote for an orchestra, I wrote something that sounded fine, but it was very hard to play. And the reason why it was hard to play is because I hadn't given the brass players enough breathing time. It was things like that there's certain actual technical things that you've got to remember when you're writing for orchestra, so that you wouldn't suddenly write a low phrase on the trombones and then suddenly go really high, because their lip completely changes the technique and
the cavern in the mouth and the jaw
so you have to
position
think,
and all.
you have to think more texturally when you write for an orchestra. I mean, obviously the strings, they're very versatile. They can do everything, and they can cover up a maelstrom of sounds and things like that. But the more you know about the range of the instruments and the colours, like the harp is one of the most amazing instruments, because there's so many different ways of playing it, and it can sustain, it can play short, you can play harmonics on it. And it's actually, for one instrument, it can actually be heard over the entire the orchestra, and so can the triangle of all things, the orchestral triangle. It's just got that pitch that really, and you can overuse it, or you can just be subtle about it, and things like that. It's, when you write for orchestra, it's really amazing to know about the percussion section, what they can do, because they can really sort of make the orchestra sound much better, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, it can become quite epic. You get the timpanies in there, and you get everything, and it's just like boom, boom, boom. You can feel there's tension, there's movement. It's almost like marching off to war, sort of. You can hear the war drums. It's fantastic. I mean, I think maybe when I imagine it, I over romanticize it maybe a little bit, in that I think people like Mozart, especially because he was such a master, that he would just hear the piece of music with all the elements in there, and that's where I always got confused. I'm like, but I think
he did though. I think him and Stravinsky were like that.
They would just hear the elements and just write it down, because they know exactly what it is.
If you look at this, and you can tell, if you look at the scores, it literally is written out like that. There's hardly any crossings out at all. It literally is straight from the head or heart via the head into the hand into the paper, then given to the copyist. Whereas there was other composers that really struggled for perfection, and Beethoven was one of them. If you look at his notebooks, there were crossings out, there were mistakes. He would rewrite in passages all the time, and it was a different process. And he would have, he would come up with a finished product, but it would be a lot more of a pain in, he was much more asking questions about his music. Whereas I don't think Mozart ever doubted he was wrong, and Stravinsky never doubted he was wrong.
True. I think maybe,
Stravinsky also did this wonderful thing with certain types of music he did. He would write the score in colour, so you could see when you analyse it how it was working, because it was quite complicated. He would write certain motifs in a red, and then for himself to remind himself of that tune, then he'd put it in the flutes a little bit later, and then,
Wow.
And you look at the original score and they're in colour, and they're like works of art. There's no mistakes on them. And light motifs and all these various themes. Schumann, the composer, he used to write secret codes in his music.
Did he?
To his lover, Clara. And there was a little code book that he gave to her, which was like, when you hear this passage, darling, it means I love you eternally, sort of thing.
Oh, wow,
and
that's fantastic.
To this day, they're still to this day trying to decipher some of them, because so these weird, and they were often hidden in the timpani. There would be some rhythm or something like that. And
wow. So I take it the notebook has then gotten lost.
No, I think some of them exist, but it was between them, so it was a sort of coded language between the two of them.
Okay, that's brilliant.
Elgar used to do a few secret codes. There's one in the Enigma Variations that there's a still massive debate over what actually he himself had said, I've hidden a popular tune of the day. It was something like, yes, we have no bananas, or something like that. In this serious piece of music, there's another that nobody's ever found it yet. So
brilliant.
Maybe he was winding up the masses or something like that.
Maybe, yeah. Well, I suppose when you're up there, you gotta try and make light of it as well. I think probably the reason why Beethoven struggled as much. And doubted himself as much is because his old man, that's why he went deaf, because his old man used to beat him because he didn't perform as well as Mozart did, because that's what he wanted. Because his old man was basically like a failed violinist, wasn't he? He was a mean old bastard drunk. And I think that's probably it's funny how these things tend to carry even subliminally. through till, I suppose to the end, or until you work these issues out. But I think that's probably why, for him it was it had to be just right, and overthinking it, self-doubt is probably part of that bit where, he didn't quite live up to Daddy's expectations, and
Yeah, I'm sure,
definitely got the
sure
fist.
that there was a lot of reasons.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it's man, but I think Mozart. There's just you can hear it as well in the music. That's like it's intent, and it's how he heard it, and it just came out. It must be nice. Must be nice. Some people say that they can sometimes. It's interesting that you said about him writing in colors. Is it because some people hear music in colors, or they can have a visual representation of the of the
it's
frequencies.
Called synesthesia, isn't it?
There you go. Yeah.
Synesthesia, and it's actually a brain condition where Miles Davis had synesthesia, the jazz musician, and Scriabin, the Russian composer, he had it, and it was basically you would see shapes and often colours with certain notes. And they did this experiment and they got, I think, 500 people who all have synesthesia, and they played them 10 or 12 pieces of music, and they had to write down what they were seeing, and about 95% of the audience wrote the same thing down.
Wow.
So it's not only a clear yellow, it's a yellow with green going towards green,
Wow.
And they all wrote specific things like that, so it's obviously a condition.
Wow.
And Scriabin invented this sort of instrument where he would set these lights off that were the colours he saw. I've forgotten what it was called, but it's well known about.
Wow, that's
and
fantastic.
Miles Davis claimed this synesthesia, that he had synesthesia, and it's a very interesting thing because, like sound, music in the truest form, it goes on. It's an infinitum. Now digitalization has capped it, but the actual true sound of a violin playing, or a human voice, to be honest, is full of so many different harmonics that just go on forever. And we can hear what we can hear. Dogs hear it differently. Cats will hear it differently.
Yeah.
Horses will hear it differently.
Yeah.
And colour is exactly the same. It's some people will see a different green to a different green, and that goes on as a result, and the spectrum just goes on ad infinitum.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore you get this moment of time when everything is connected and associated, and that's the living moment we are in of the music, or of the colour, or whatever it is. But it's not necessarily right or wrong, which is what's fun about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, but it's very interesting that you say that about 95% of these people, they had the same color, same shapes and things like that. Because I mean, and then you touched on the our range of perception. Our eyes only see infrared light, but obviously there are light spectrums outside of this which we can't see. And exactly. I'm a big believer in quantum physics and quantum realities and these sorts of things, and there being things around us that we can't see or perceive or hear, or and as you said, dogs and cats, they can hear different frequencies, higher and lower than we can, but it doesn't, just because we can't perceive them doesn't mean that they're not there. So
I agree.
It's a very interesting thing, and maybe these people they can tap into a different, just an extended sort of wing of our reality and our perceived reality, where they can see these things. It's like, people who have perfect pitch, how do you explain that? But it happens.
Exactly.
People can do that, and then obviously people have other abilities that are outside the norm, but that's a very interesting subject, especially if you're thinking about ghosts and things like that, which working at Ronnie Scott's, because they're digging up the foundations today. We were all joking about digging about the bodies that they're going to find under Ronnie Scott's.
All those spirits will be released, literally.
Yeah. That'll be fun. Not that Ronnie's isn't void of energy and things like that, as we all know.
It's definitely got a huge energy in those walls there.
Yeah.
I mean, I've sometimes, when I'm practicing the piano, I've never physically seen a ghost there, but I feel that they're there all around. And sometimes when I'm playing the piano, I often turn around, just it's just a weird thing. But lovely.
It feels like somebody's walked behind your back, walked past you.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had that with Chris Dagley.
Yeah, I remember you saying that before.
Yeah, I saw him in there one morning. It was just really strange. It was where the booth is now. So it was not that long ago. It was 8 years ago. And it was a Sunday morning. I was setting up. There was nobody else there yet. I know this because I opened the club, I unlocked it, and the managers weren't there until like 11. So I had a little bit of time in there by myself, and I was standing behind the desk programming, looking at the stage, and as I was looking at the door that goes into the office, from the pillar that's next to the piano where you normally are to the other one that's by the bar, I just saw him walking, like fully suited, just walking towards the door, and I was just like,
amazing,
oi, and it gives me goosebumps, man. Yeah, it's
it will do.
People call me crazy, but I've always been able to sort of see and sense these sort of things ever since I was a kid. Seen quite a few
I think
things.
You're right. I think certain people definitely sense them more than others. Nina, same as you. She's really Nina Farrow.
Yeah.
She felt and physically saw spirits in that room.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've always joke about Ronnie finally accepting me, because I just started there. I think I'd been working there maybe 3 or 4 months, and it was the John Dankworth big band, Sunday night John Dankworth big band.
Right,
and, that was when the booth was still, or the sound desk was still next to where the booth is now. And you remember we had that little mixer on the top where we did the announcement mic.
Yes, that's right.
And then the main PA was on another one that was sort of by the wall. So I remember sound check went perfectly fine. Everything was good. Everything was great. So I do the announcement for the gig to start. And I pull the microphone down. And that was it. And the music starts, and there's nothing. Like, it's really weird. And I'm like, I can hear them. Luckily, it was a big band, so the PA wasn't that much needed just right from the bat. And it's just, and I'm looking at the desk, and I can see everything coming in, and I'm looking over, and everything's fine, and it's not working. I switch the desk off, switch it back on. The big band's playing. They're going on. Nobody knows about this. Switch the desk back on. Still nothing. And I look over, and the fader that's right next to the wall, which is like, I mean, it's such a stretch. You're there. Even get back there. That fader was completely pulled down. It was just like, okay. And there was just sort of like in the back of my mind, I heard this little giggle, some guy laughing at me. It's like, "Oh, hello, welcome." But
well, if it was Ronnie, he could have also been doing it because he would have been playing a trick on John Dankworth as well, because they would have known each other very well.
Yeah. I mean, this was a very short time before John died.
Right.
Was it 2000?
I remember when it was, because they played a suite called Midnight something or other.
Yeah, with Cleo Lane, she was singing, and their daughter, is it Jackie? Yeah, Jackie Dankworth.
Yeah, I was actually at that gig. I remember it.
Yeah,
I didn't know you had all these things going on.
Well, that's good. I always say if people don't know I'm there, then I've done my job well. That's kind
right.
of the comb through which I stroke the the measurement. If people are looking at me, then I'm not quite doing the job as well as I should be doing it. But yeah,
it's true.
Yeah. So, what have you said you've been doing a lot of cooking and smoking. I'm interested in hearing about that. What have you been smoking? Smoking fish, smoking meat?
Yeah, I did. I've been doing a lot of hot smoked salmon and sort of things like that because it's quite easy to do. And I did a few briskets.
Nice.
And I often just use the smoke to cook things like what's that Caribbean chicken they have?
Jerk chicken.
Jerk chicken. I've been doing a lot of jerk chicken because last year I grew some Scotch bonnets, which were really, really good.
Nice.
And I was surprised at how much flavour they had. Everybody said, "Oh, they're really hot." They are hot, but they have a lot of flavour. In fact, when you do jerk chicken, you have to use Scotch bonnets because they have so much a sweetness to them.
So much aroma.
You know, I tried it with some other ones, and it was then really hot, and you didn't really taste the flavour of it. So
Yeah, I mean the Scotch bonnet is, for instance, much more flavorful than habanero, and I mean on the Scoville scale they're basically the same, but it almost feels like a habanero is hotter, just because the Scotch bonnet's got so much more flavor and sweetness. I think because that's how the Scoville unit works, is 1 part chili versus X amount of sugar water. Until you can't feel the chili anymore.
I never knew that.
Yeah, so if you get something that's like, I mean, the highest that you can get is 15 million Scoville units, but that stuff will put you on your back permanently.
Yeah.
Like pepper spray, for instance, is 5 million. If you get the Dorset Naga or the Ghost Chili, they're around the sort of 950 to 1 million. And then you get things like the Carolina Reaper, which is, I think, currently it's either that one or the Trinidad Scorpion Moruga, but they're sort of the 1.4 million mark. And
I haven't got any of them.
Yeah, no, that's hot. I tell you what, it's almost as hot as that chili in the the curry in the Brick Lane Curry House in New York.
Oh yes, I know that. Yes, I've heard about that.
My lord,
I love it. I like the principles of the way of slow cooking, particularly of smoking, because I just love the way it gets infused, and you can monitor that. You can control it. If it gets too, you can then take it out if you want, and then put it in the regular oven. And I like the fact it does take a bit of time to do it properly.
Yeah.
I haven't done what you've done with the whole biltong and things like that, which is that's something I would be interested in doing at some point, but. It's just one thing at a time,
if you're doing the smoking, man, honestly, the biltong is so easy to do. Really, it takes the preparation of it all doesn't take that long. The only thing that you got to do is just wait for it to dry. But apart from that, you salt it for, depending on the thickness of the meat, you'll salt it for an hour or two in rock salt. Then you wash all that off with your wet mix, and that takes a minute or so per piece. You just soak it in there and let all the salt wash off. Then you put your dry mix on top, your spices. Leave it in the fridge for about 24 hours. Then it's marinated. Then you hang it up. And then that's it. Then you just wait and eat.
You see, I love it. It's just wonderful. And it's such an old way of doing food. I live on a farm, so I remember chatting to the farmer once about how in the old days before fridges were invented, how they preserve the meat, and obviously that was one of the things, salt cures and things like that, but a lot of the time they actually used to bury the lamb and things like in the ground in big holes, and the first layer of it would be a bit mouldy, but once that mould had been cut off,
that's right,
the meat would be actually last quite a long time.
Yeah, they used to make these sort of like hills, and then they dig into the hill, and that was their sort of cold storage room.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah,
and
it's a lot of fun. So you live on a farm, did you say?
Yeah, well, it's an arable farm. I live on a cottage on the farm, and the actual farmhouse is in. Well, the farmhouse is just down there, but it's all fields and horses around here.
Very nice. Very nice.
It's very idyllic.
Man.
And there's another. The sister of the farm has got another farm which does all the beef and things like that. So it's quite nice.
Very nice. Very nice. So you get some good meat there. And,
I found it very strange because I got so used to being here in the country the whole time that when I was in London yesterday, even I was like, oh, it's all these people. I was, I don't mind, but
especially yesterday would have been a shock to the system, right?
Yeah, it was a bit. I didn't mind though.
It was still like that when we left. It was crazy. Just it was like people had just, well, understandably so. People had a year of frustration, and all those everybody that was still out was 19, 20 years old. So you can imagine as they were coming of age, they were stuck inside and they couldn't go anywhere and they couldn't enjoy that. Imagine yourself as an 18-year-old, having been told to stay inside, and when it really doesn't make any sense because it doesn't affect kids.
No, exactly.
Really.
It doesn't slightly annoy me that they always do that same shot of Soho from that high camera, so it looks like the place is really, really, really everybody on top of each other. And they do the same in Bournemouth Beach, and they put this long lens on it, so it looks like everybody's on top of each other. And I'm sure that there was a bit of that going on, but they like to really just rub that in the press that everybody can't behave themselves. It's just a little. And another little thing in the excuse bag, when they finally decide to, swerve the other way again, they're like, oh, you see, it's because of you guys. It's because there's people queuing outside Primark. And it's funny because, like, I even heard, some of my colleagues mutter that. It's like, oh yeah, I just hope these idiots outside Primark don't get us locked down again. It's like, no, I'm sorry. No, exactly.
It doesn't work like that.
No, I agree.
But yeah, I mean that's a whole discussion which we can have on another day, because it's unfortunately so divisive. And you feel like, I think you and I we're of the same mind when it comes to this thing. But I've found as well that if I find a piece of information and I try and pass that along to friends and colleagues, I very quickly get shoved to the side, told to go put my tinfoil hat back on, and I'm like, well, really, I'm not doing this out of enjoyment. It's really just because I love you people and I want to share with you what I know, rather than talk about compressors and plugins and what you did over the weekend. Let's talk about something serious, because it's a global thing that's affecting all of us right now. And as I said to another colleague of mine the other day, one day, right, when all this shit is over, we're going to have to look our kids in the eye and tell them what we did, to stop this madness from going a little bit too far. Or, if we're, in the position that we were unsuccessful in thwarting it, still, what did you do? Can you go to sleep at night with a clear conscience and like, I did everything I could do? But
it's a very good point, Tim. It's very good.
It's really just, because it's not about me. I'm 37. I'm not over the hill. I'm not dead yet. But whatever comes after this, I've already had my life, my normal life up until this point. But I'm concerned about my daughter. She's 8, and she's been locked down, for a whole year of her youth. And,
Exactly, and as you know, when you're 8, a year is an eighth of your life.
It's a long time. It's a very long time. I mean, we're super fortunate.
That's like 15 years for most people.
Yeah, right. Yeah, man. It's and also time feels longer, doesn't it? When you're a kid, you remember a year ago, and that just feels like forever. I wonder if maybe time works relatively as you get older. The segments of time feel shorter, doesn't it? Because nowadays a year just feels like that. It's crazy.
No, yeah. Someone did explain to me why that works, and I've already forgotten. But there is a reason why that happens.
I'd be interested to find out.
It's the fact is that when a child who is born from 0 to 1, that is their life, and they have done all these things in that thing. Yeah. Whereas when you get to 80. You've got it's maths. Someone explained it.
It must be some sort of like exponential ratio, because, like you said,
it's
from 0 to 1, that's your whole life, right? And that's everything. And then from 1 to 2, it's the same amount of time, but you've basically halved.
Yeah.
And then it'll be a third, and then it'll be like a quarter, and then it just sort of goes down like that. That's an
Which is why your 8-year-old, the whole year of her life is. For us, it's like 20%, if you see what I mean. Whereas for her, it's 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 an eighth.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm not explaining it very well. It's
No,
an
no,
eighth
you
of
are.
her life. Yeah, it's an eighth of her life, but it's already 1/50th of my life because I'm 50th a year.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean that would
So
be
it's
the
a
equivalent.
lot smaller.
The equivalent of you being, in lockdown for 12 years.
Oh my God.
Can you imagine that? They would just, well, at least a lot of meat will be smoked and a lot of chilies will be grown, and as long as we can keep ourselves positively occupied, I think that was the thing that definitely got me through, is having just sort of circle round to talking about having other interests and other hobbies and things that you can fall back on or that you can draw inspiration from, because those are the things that saved me during the lockdown for sure. Because if I didn't have my carpentry and if I didn't have my food and things like that, I would have probably gone slightly more insane than I am currently. It's
exactly.
It's very important to have these other things to draw on and also to fall back on. So kudos to those who made it, and kudos to those who made it through in a better position. Like I said, people like Tim Thornton with the pizza and these guys that are doing these things. It's nice to see the resilience. Because
hang on, Tim. Someone's at the door. Just
okay.
Can you just pause it a sec? There we go. Perfect.
Oh, lovely. Yeah. So what were we talking about? Talking about growing things and
just keep them busy in lockdown, or not keep them busy, as the case may be.
Yeah. No. Have you been writing much music? Are you?
I have been doing a bit. I mean, I'm doing a stream on Saturday from Ronnie, so I did the arrangement for that. That's for string quartet and sax, piano, bass, drums. And that battery's a bit low at the moment.
Whoopsie. Okay. Well, if you want, we can pick it up on another time and have an episode too, if you want.
Yeah, that might be a good idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I have been writing, and yeah, I've just been doing bits of everything really, tidying up things.
Were you involved in Polly's new album?
Which one?
She brought out a new album recently, hasn't she?
Yeah, no, the last one she did that I was in was the American one. I think that's the same one we're talking about.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, that was a year ago, wasn't it? Okay, no, a year and a half ago. She's been doing lots of writing.
Yeah.
Which I think she's really been enjoying. Yeah, I did some of the orchestrations for that one, and we recorded that in New York.
Oh, nice.
At the old the power station. It was great, and with some phenomenal musicians playing it and on it, which was great fun.
Yeah, New York is such a lovely place. I really enjoyed New York. It's funny because most people are like, oh no, New York's too crazy and it's too busy, and I really liked it. Whereas Los Angeles for me was just too laid back. Everybody was just a bit too chill for me.
Yeah, completely. Isn't it amazing? The same country, but it's like being in a different place.
Oh yeah. It's almost like that with every state you go to. I mean, when I finished high school, I went to work on a custom harvesting crew. So we were combining. Basically, our boss had a farm in South Dakota, and his brother had a farm in North Dakota, in Dayton, which is Drayton. It's about 17 miles from the border. But first we went down. We started in Oklahoma. Then we went to Kansas. Then we went to Colorado. Then we went to Nebraska. Then South Dakota, North Dakota, Minnesota, and even just vertically up and down over those states. But the people that you meet are so different. It's crazy.
Absolutely.
And the New Yorkers, I find I get along with them. They're a bit more sort of crass and to the point. But I think that's probably a bit more in line with my South African personality, where we're sort of people.
Yeah, well, you do get on with it.
Yeah. I think people kind of sometimes think we're maybe rude or short when we say things, but it's just our sort of rhythm maybe. But yeah, who knows? Who knows, really? But yeah, New York's a lovely place. I'd love to go back.
Energy.
Great energy.
I'm slightly concerned that this thing, the iPad battery, might just go. I can either get a charger.
No, it's
or
cool.
We can do it another time.
Let's do a part 2 sometime soon. Maybe
anytime. We can do it this week, whenever you want to.
Okay. Well, we'll organize it once we've said goodbye here, and then we'll go from there. But for now, thank you very much. I really, really appreciate you taking the time doing this. It was fun to talk to you.
Likewise, and it's really nice to have a chat about everything.
That's what it's about, man. It's really just, like I said, everybody's, what's it about? It's like, it's about you. And that's it. That's all it is. It's just a chat. There's no agenda. There's no nothing. I just want to get to know you, because my whole point in starting this whole thing was I realized that I'm quite fortunate in knowing a vast amount of really awesome people with very interesting stories and great history and abilities and talents. And I just want to sort of, share you and who you are and get to know you myself, because when are we going to stand at the pub and have this conversation?
Yeah.
Absolutely never. And
exactly.
the things I've learned about people that I've known for a long time, like yourself, in this it's just, it's unparalleled. It's great. So, thank you for taking the time and doing this and getting to know you a little bit better.
Well, thank you, Tins. Excellent.
Great. Lovely. Well, so we'll pick it up again very soon. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, this is James Pearson.
Well, there you go. I hope you've enjoyed that as much as I have. And I will be posting James's social media details in the description, as will I do mine. As always, you can get in touch with us, see what we're up to. As always, like, share, and subscribe. Get the word out there. Keep it sound.